Hello and welcome. I am Ben the Best 5 and this is the first video I'm doing in a collaboration series with Mr. Spaceship over here.
So, hello there. It's me, Spaceship. I'm also doing. This is also the first collaboration for me as well, and I'm really glad that we have this opportunity. So now I'm going to give the word back to Ben the Best Five.
So yes, this is the first mission in a series of collaborations we will be doing. We're basically following on from kind of my idea of the refueling base, and we're going to be building a similar sort of base and other sort of structures on Minmus, and we're going to be colonizing it over the next few weeks, hopefully for the enjoyment of the viewers. Now this particular
Ex-
payload I'm launching here is the um, is going to be a satellite which does resource monitoring and mapping so that we can choose an ideal landing site, and there's also a whole bunch of other small satellites which are going to detach from the main satellite, which will then be used to set up a constellation in polar orbit of Minmus so that at all times we have ground and orbital communication back to Kerbin, which is important when you're landing perhaps smaller modules which don't have as good communication built into them. Now I'm just going for a rough orbit, and my periapsis is rather high. That's because I had to use a rocket which was a bit more powerful than what the mission required for the actual weight. However, to still manage a recovery, my next size down in rocket, it was not powerful enough to perform such a mission. So that's why I am going for such a high periapsis as well as such a far away recovery, just because the next one down wasn't big enough. And yes, I am aware that a recovery that far away from Kerbin does really actually start to cost you, but given that this is a sandbox save, that's not particularly relevant.
exactly, and going with a bigger rocket is always better than struggling with the mission itself, or at least that's what I'm always going for.
So yes, this recovery here, it's a pretty standard recovery. However, this is actually the first time I've used those air brakes. Well, the first time I've used it in a non-replica um, build, and that way it means I can get more performance out of the booster because it means I don't have to perform a slowdown and landing burn, and I crunch the numbers, and that it's better this way.
Speaking of recovery, I'm actually not that, in my videos at least, I'm not really doing a lot of recoveries since my main save file up until recently has been a sandbox or is a sandbox. So the only thing that I'm usually recovering are only SSTOs. But this is also a very interesting topic for my viewers as well, so that they can see and experience another kind of way of playing the game.
Yeah, I did the maths, and recovering boosters is a lot. If you make a slightly more expensive booster, but if it's recoverable, um, unless you're making something which is really super small, something which is really super big, or something which is exactly 25 tons, you're much better off going with something which is recoverable, just because you can get up to 90% of the funds back. So realistically, you're only going to spend the money that you spent on the fuel. You get all the rest of it back.
Exactly, and that's also kind of the main issue we have in the real world, the cost. But yeah, this is very interesting, and like I quickly touched up in the beginning, or just a few seconds earlier, I just started a new live stream based career mode, and there I'm definitely gonna use all sorts of tricks to save on money.
Yeah, I also did an investigation as to how good SSTOs are, and they are relatively well. If you're doing a return mission, they're better, but if you're only sending a payload one direction, you're far better off using one of these because a recoverable booster like this will actually use less fuel than an SSTO will use, make it more efficient for the overall mission. Anyway, as for the actual mission profile, I needed to place this into a Minmus orbit. A kind of moderate Minmus orbit would do fine, just as long as it's polar. Basically anywhere above 30 kilometers and below about 300 kilometers, and the scanning tech works, which is what we're going for. So I tried to aim for just a little bit below 100 kilometers, just because I know that at that point, all of your satellites will still communicate together, and correction maneuvers won't be particularly difficult. But at that point, you can also still cover all of the ground, because although it won't have anything in a polar orbit, the in Kerbal Space Program, you don't actually need direct line of sight. If there is a mountain or a bit of the horizon, you can still connect to the satellite through there. So you could just see me lowering my periapsis there to about the height I was happy with, and then from there I just set it to burn and circularize.
Speaking of this line of communication, that's sometimes really confusing or really ridiculous. For example, on my one of my previous moon missions, the comms line went pretty much almost straight through the moon, and that was really weird. But this is something we can obviously abuse a tiny bit.
I mean, it is kind of realistic, because in the real world, comms won't immediately black out. There's no line of sight. They will gradually taper off and become a little bit weaker. And given the relative size of Minmus, it's not entirely unreasonable that a signal could pass through a large amount of its ground over the horizon, just simply because, well, hey, look, you can land on this thing using a Kerbal's EVA pack.
Yes, but yeah.
You can,
And it of course depends. I'm not no expert, but it also depends on the wavelengths. So yeah,
yeah.
certainly.
I mean, you can land 10 kilometers away from your target and have to cross an entire hemisphere. It's ridiculously small. But then
It's really, really tiny.
all of Kerbal Space Program's planets are incredibly small.
Yes, exactly. Like I'm not quite sure where I picked that one up, but I think the closest planet to Earth in scale is Joule, and even
Yeah,
Joule is smaller.
yeah. Joule is smaller than Earth, but it's got a higher gravitational pull, and it's also got
But yeah,
a
the thing,
higher atmosphere. It's got a larger atmosphere.
yes,
I'll tell you what I
and
did
the
once,
kind
right?
of the entire thing,
What I did once, right,
and
was
the
I loaded up a realism overhaul save, right? Put
mhm.
a satellite into low Earth orbit, and then I switched back to Kerbin planets just to see where the orbit would actually line up, and the orbit was
Okay.
actually just below that of the Mun. So
Wow.
yeah,
Oh,
that
it's
really
quite a big
illustrates
difference.
the difference between um, Kerbin and the Earth.
Well, yes, certainly. I've actually been thinking about doing at some point a realism overhaul playthrough, but never really managed to get around to it.
Well, realism overhaul, in my experience, is pretty fun to play by yourself, but it's not something I could realistically end up making a series for, just because it's one of the most user unfriendly forms of content. Just because everyone's install is different, and you create an install, and then 2 weeks later it's broken, and half of your crafts have been deleted. At least that's my experience.
Oh, okay,
So
well, yeah, like the only experience I have with realism overhaul is I've installed it once, like I think 2-ish years ago, and then went once suborbital, and that was it. So
yeah,
my playtime there was just maybe an hour and a half at best. So can't really comment on that.
it's pretty fun, but it's also broken. I mean, it's realistically, it's never going to be super stable, just because it is about 700 different mods all working together to give you an experience. So it's never going to be
Yes.
super clean, but to actually play it yourself, it's um it's decent, but for a YouTube series, the user relatability would be
Yeah,
very
not
low,
that big.
and even if they installed all the mods and everything, it's not just going to be something that they could just pick up and play, and that's kind of kind of like a thing that I kind of enjoy doing with my channel is I do make it something which like anyone can. I don't install any mods, so basically as soon as you've got Kerbal Space Program installed, you have everything that you need um, in your game to, to, to do what I do. Anyway, as for this mission, what you can see I'm doing here is I detached one of the satellites from the main survey satellite, and what it's doing is it's going to enter an orbit which has a period exactly 1/5 of the orbit of the main satellite. So that way it will then perform its orbit and end up 1/5 of an orbit behind that of the main satellite, so that it's in position. And I've got 5 satellites which are all going to end up in this orbit, and they're all going to end up, 1/5 of an orbit behind in front of actually the other one. So that way they're all moving together at the same speed and are always in contact with each other. And since they're going to be doing that, they'll also always be in contact with every single part of Minmus's surface.
Exactly, great, and such a communications network is very good and very important for the future content of this series.
So, and also.
Oh, and by the way, just because you said earlier about the that the viewers can relate to your videos, I'm actually doing the same thing. Just a few mods, or the mods that I have installed are primarily, all of them are visual mods, so or MagChat, but I'm not using MagChat exactly because of this reason, since I'm trying to help out newer players if they have some questions. So that's why I'm sometimes doing a guide video too. But yeah, so that pretty much everybody can pick up whatever I'm doing and replicate it. So that's also very interesting, I think, from the viewer's perspective.
So yes, anyway, here is the constellation complete. I just cut out the creation of it because it's not particularly interesting. As you can see, all 5 satellites are orbiting together and their relative positions are the same. And just in case you're wondering, to get the second satellite in position, what you do is you just let pass under twice or pass it under 3 times, and that will insert it into the slot. Anyway, here we are on our lovely outro screen. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the upcoming series. When are you releasing the next episode?
Well, the next episode should be up in a few days. So if you started to like this series and are interested to seeing the next part, which will be released on the Spaceship YouTube channel, you should be clicking the link that you can see on the screen.
Yes, that's right. On screen there will in fact be 2 links. One of them will just be whatever YouTube recommends from my channel, and the other one will be the next episode in this series. Anyway, that's all from me, Ben the Best 5, and Spaceship here. We hope you enjoyed the content. Please like, please subscribe to both myself and Spaceship here, and we hope you had a great day.